Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host Todd Tavares. This podcast moves beyond questions of God's existence to ask, what's next in a godless world? If you're enjoying the show so far, remember to like and subscribe, rate and review, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Beyond Atheism is produced and distributed by Atheists United Studios.
Today, we welcome back Dr. Juhem Navarro-Rivera. He's a scholar, writer, and activist. As research director at Socioanalítica Research LLC, he has written about the connections between secularism, race, and politics. He also works with humanist organizations, serving on the American Humanist Association Board of Directors from 2019 to 2023, and was a co-founder and co-chair of the Latinx Humanist Alliance. His current focus is a weekly newsletter exploring the role of secular people in American political life. It's called Secular Politics and is available on Substack. Juhem, welcome back to Beyond Atheism.
I know, it's been a trip. I think it was your first interview, so I
Yeah,
hope I'm not
you were.
the last.
Yes.
I hope you someone scheduled after me.
Yeah, and Juhem, we haven't gotten much better. I hate to let you down.
Yeah. No, I think it's been about 2 years, almost. I'm not sure when it was, but I'm pretty sure it was in February 2 years ago that we had you on. So yeah, thanks for coming back. It's good to talk with you again. You write a lot about politics, and I wanted to know whether you ever thought about running for political office yourself, and if you think you would make a good politician.
I think the definition, it depends on the definition of a good politician. And,
Always good. Set your terms.
It's funny because we're doing a lot of work around the house. So I found a lot of old boxes that I haven't gotten through since we moved in the middle of like the first wave of the pandemic, and I found all these stuff from college, like including some of the campaign materials when I run for student body.
Right.
Which is aside from the AHA election, which the AHA board is one of the few boards that is elected. But you don't really campaign. So, that was so that run in college at the University of Puerto Rico. And you got to realize that running for school is like student body office, student council office at the University of Puerto Rico is a serious thing. Like, eventually a lot of those people are going to be legislators, governors. Like the current resident commissioner, which is Puerto Rico non-voting representative in Congress, actually was serving at the same time I was serving in there. So it was serious hardball, and I didn't enjoy the experience. So would I run for office? I mean, I wouldn't never say never, but I certainly don't like the running part of running for office. I don't enjoy the part of being a candidate. And then there's the other aspect of, would I be a good politician? Well, I mean, that depends on what you mean, what a good politician is. I don't think I would be there like baiting people, so I would certainly won't be a good social media politician. I think I would be kind of like a good like deal maker kind of sort. But I don't think I will also be very good at crossing the aisle. So it's kind of like trying to get in-party stuff done. I mean, looking at the context in which we're thinking, which is like, American politics in the second decade of the 21st century.
Right.
So I think that's where I'll put it. But yeah, if the other parts, I'm not good at the like schmoozing, and so be awful at raising money.
Right, I know, which is what they spend most of their time doing now.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But
what I mean is, I'll be an awful politician with the terms where politicians have to work now.
Right. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Well, when you're writing about politics now, just like, I guess this might be some background, might be clarifying. What are we talking about in this when we think of this sort of secular politics? Are we thinking about governance? Are we thinking about day-to-day stuff? We're talking about like ordinances that affect your lawn. What's the focus of secular politics? Where are we looking?
I think we're still figuring it out. I think part of it, I started it because I have a backlog stuff I've been wanting to do, and not having the time.
Yeah.
And now, like I don't want to be a bad atheist and say it, but like whatever, stars have aligned, and
Uh-huh.
Yes.
I'm able to to get some of this stuff out. I'm trying to get my writing muscles ready. So I was thinking, like I remember like 2011, I actually had a daily blog, which I actually like ran it like for a year, so like writing every day. And it was awesome. Like when people ask me for papers in 2012 and that era, like I will get them out because
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So now I'm trying to get one every week. Initially with with these topics that I've been doing, I've been playing with that data of the secular legislators, using mostly the stuff that either friendly atheists have been publishing or from the Center for Free Thought Equality, and kind of like mapping it and analyzing it. So some of stuff is coming from there, and I'm planning on doing more stuff on that. I'm probably getting more complex in the analysis as time moves on, and I'm able to get more data going, and more data clean. Um, but I think in general is ever since I've been a part of this movement officially since like the 2010s, unofficially like since I became an atheist like in the early 2000s. I think we are very bad at playing retail politics. And I have a lot of criticism. I have a lot of advice. I had a lot of thoughts about how we do things, and I think that this is my way of you gonna. I've a lot of these things I have done it privately, like not necessarily privately. Some of them have been topics that I have done talks about that are public, some of them recorded, but also conversations that I've had with members of organizations. That we sometimes agree with me, sometimes disagree with me on what I think. But yeah, I think our conversations we need to have if we want to be a serious player in politics at different levels. I mean, I think a lot of people focus too much on the national. There's only like three members of Congress plus like Senator Cinema. Uh, which is a whole
So wait,
different
what
can of
is
worms.
she not? Where does she come down?
So it's an interesting story. So when she was first elected to the House, and actually not even before she was elected to the House in 2012, she was an Arizona state senator, and she used to hang out with the Secular Coalition for Arizona. She did like events with them, and so when she was elected in 2012, which was the same election that Pete Stark, who was the only open atheist in Congress, lost his re-election bid. Like kind of like everybody was like, oh yeah, we have like we lost Pete Stark, we gained Cinema, and then all of the sudden like her, I don't know if it was her campaign I'm assuming it was her campaign director. I don't remember well now. But certainly she didn't have a staff in Congress at that time because she was just newly elected, so it's probably her campaign director. Like sent a letter to friendly atheists, like saying, no, 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 like non-theists, like atheists. Those terms do not describe her. She's not religious, but she's. And then I was listening to an interview with Representative Jared Hoffman, who is now the only open humanist in Congress, who was doing the podcast Straight White American Jesus, and he says like, and they they're kind of like from the same class, so they ended up in Congress started in Congress at the same time, and he's like, she was an open atheist, and all of a sudden like so it's been an interesting journey. But yeah, like so when I started doing the analysis of of the dashboard that I created, it's like, yeah, it's like Cinema is not here because she's officially unaffiliated, but she doesn't want to be one of these people.
Yeah. So who is there, and what makes them secular?
So there's only three people. In Congress, in the House of Representatives, there's Huffman. There is I believe it's Eric Sorensen of Illinois, who says he's unaffiliated, although he admits he's unaffiliated to the Center for Free Thought Equality, and he had the endorsement of the Free Thought Equality PAC. He actually is not listed as unaffiliated in the Pew kind of like congressional quarterly data, so it's all complicated. And then there's my own representative, Jamie Raskin of Maryland, who it's famous for like all the Jansi stuff and the impeachment. And he is Jewish and humanist.
Okay. And what does that count as? Does that count as
Well,
unaffiliated?
in the Pew count, he's Jewish, but he we count him as one of us. He does event, like he's the co-founder of the Free Thought Caucus. He does events with like secular organizations all the time, and like there's nothing that says you cannot be Jewish and humanist.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a whole society of humanistic Judaism.
Yes.
There.
Yes. We just talked to someone about that, and it gets even messier once you get into it.
Was Paul Gallen?
No.
It was Jonathan Friedman who. Yeah, he leads a Jewish humanist congregation. Yeah. What about Bernie Sanders? I guess he would come up on the list as Jewish, right? Okay. Right. Yeah.
So how much of this then is it just identity? When we think about like secular politics, secular politicians, do they have to identify as none? Do they have to come out and say, yes, I am this, or are they marked? Can they be understood as being secular allies and still be religious? Are there ways to know this?
I would say they're both. Like the people in the and let's move away from Congress because this list in there's no list for state reps. So the ones that I use for state legislators, because there's senators and representatives, is the people who have contacted the Center for Free Thought Equality or the Center for Free Thought Equality to say that they're openly, and they can be like religiously unaffiliated, they can be like cultural Catholic. So there's a lot of ways in which people identify, but they identify in this larger sense of the knowns, which is kind of like people generally are. So it's as diverse as the knowns. And I think it's very interesting that even those three people in Congress, like they have, there's a known. We don't know if it's non-theistic. Representative Sorensen. There's like a person like who is a humanist but also has a religious background, like Raskin. And then there's like your atheist, like non-theistic, identified humanist. And then you have Cinema, who is like a known, who we don't know her beliefs. And I think it runs the gamut of like the spectrum of what we know about American knowns. So I think in that sense, it's very representative, even if there's four people.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Which is amazing. And at the state level is the same. Like a lot, some of them are atheists, some of them are agnostic, some of them are humanist, some of them are like, and then there's a longer list of that I need to curate and work with, because I'm also working with like the candidates, all the people who seek the endorsements but didn't win.
Right.
And you also have in there like a lot of allies. So there's people who are Buddhist or they're Christian and like, but they're against Christian nationalism. There's people who are Jewish. But they are not afraid from seeking the endorsement of atheist PAC, essentially. And I think in that regard that's a major progress.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That they're not running away from the support from these particular organizations.
Yeah. Do you have any numbers on that yet? Is that something that you can even give a rough estimate to? Is it common?
I had like I haven't updated it but it was in the hundreds.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we already have like 70 secular legislators at the state level.
Wow.
Plus count, and most of the people who are running are not winning.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes.
So yeah. So we're in the hundreds. That list. Plus, there's the elected official.
Right. Okay.
I mean, the local elected officials. What I meant.
So local.
Right.
Does it count appointed? Does it know if people who are appointed, or they wouldn't need that recognition?
I don't think it matters. I mean, most of them are kind of like elected, but yeah, like even appointed officials. I think appointed official is even more interesting because somebody else is taking the fall for that.
Good point.
Like, it's not the voters who are electing like these heathen. It's like some politician who probably is not a heathen appointing this person.
But I mean so there's something interesting there. And maybe we can make a prediction now, and you can test it through research. Do you predict there would be more nuns appointed or fewer nuns appointed? Because I can kind of say, like, there are because part of it is that nuns are so underrepresented already. Just randomly selecting people to do a job, you would have to end up with more nuns, right?
Yes. So I would say my prediction would be that, the number is going to go up, but because there's no way it can go down.
Right.
And, but,
Yes.
and because I think it's also the element of people, like, it's becoming more acceptable, and it's becoming more common. And especially, I mean, I think there's a little problem there, because probably the most active politically knowns are probably not the knowns. So it's probably like, it's usually your atheists, your agnostics, like, people who are involved in kind of like the AHAs, the American Atheists, the CFIs of the world, who are kind of like the more active politically, whether it's voting or like, doing all these kind of. The knowns tend to be not only in many ways like, just indifferent about religion, but also, indifferent about institutions. And so you probably, but I think, and looking at the patterns of the, I think that was last week. My post last week was looking at the regional patterns of where these legislators are coming from, and they're like coming from the Mountain West, which is not surprising. So they're coming from Arizona, like Utah, New Mexico, which are areas are pretty secular. I mean, Utah is, you're a Mormon, you're a known. That's essentially
Right.
like the religious diversity of Utah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you have New England, and actually like a third of the elected come from New England, mostly because if you know anything about New England, like New England has these ridiculously large legislatures. Like New Hampshire has like 500 members.
Okay.
Wow.
Connecticut has like 160. Massachusetts the same. Vermont has like 400. It's kind of like they have these really large legislatures that you can just and they're also very secular regions. So it makes sense that they come from these places. There's no representatives in East South Central is what they call that. It's kind of like Tennessee and Arkansas, and so there's no representatives from there. The West South Central, which is like Oklahoma, Texas. Like, so there's only one. It's from Texas,
right? So that's like Bible Belt country, where it's
Bible Belt country.
No
you
nuns.
Have a lot of no knowns, literally. And then like in the Middle Atlantic, and then there's the problem. Like the Middle Atlantic, it for the census, the Middle Atlantic region is New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. There are very few in there, like, but that region is kind of like middle of the road in terms of their proportion of knowns. And then you have in the South Atlantic, you have more, but it's like because you have Delaware and Maryland in there. And between them, they have like 5.
But that's really, really underrepresented because we have.
It's ridiculously underrepresented. I'm not.
400 plus at the national level. It's 400 plus in Congress or Congress total. The House. And
no, it's 73.
73
counting Congress.
Wait. Oh, wait. There's 73 nuns.
Openly elected officials. Openly secular elected officials.
Wait, you mean in total or?
No. In Congress, there are 4. 3 plus cinema, so there are 4.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's 70 at the state level.
At the
across
state level.
all the states.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that's really, really small. Do you know what?
No. We are agreeing there.
Yeah. I mean, so how is it that we can have the number of nuns has been increasing year on year to easily 25% right now, let's say. I think that's a safe estimate. And we're talking about...
That's a low safe estimate.
Yeah. We're talking about less than 1% in representative bodies. So are you able to say now, like, what the reason for that is? Is there a simple explanation? Or... Because if
we're a simple explanation, we wouldn't be here. So I think there are a few reasons, right? If we just look at Congress, I mean, these guys and women are constantly re-elected, so like vacancies don't happen that often. So then you have to have a vacancy. You need to be somewhere in the pipeline. Like, Democrats are less likely to have like these insurgent kind of like type candidates than Republicans have. So I mean, and literally, with the exception of two people, all of these are Democrats. So they're not gonna come from the Republican insurgent pipeline generally. And then I think there's a matter of resources, right? Like, it's not just with being an open atheist, it's being an open, like, or openly secular. You have to, it's a known with like, literally, you need to have either know people with money or have money yourself to start doing these things. And so that's why I think, like, that, I mean, I've been saying this since 2012. We need to build a pipeline. Like, we need to, like, get people running for, supporting people running for local office. Like, to me, it's being amazed, being at events and seeing people, complaining at the state of education in America. We need better education. I was like, yeah, but, the United States, the education is really, like, really localized. Like, the Department of Education, the only thing they do is like give grants. They don't set policy. They don't set curriculums. Like, they do these stuff. Like, they have these great programs and, like, kind of like have schools compete for money and stuff like that. But they can't force schools to do this stuff. And we're seeing it now again with these, like, transgender and CRT, like, mania. That, all these people, I mean, there's no other word for it, I guess.
Yeah.
That, all these people are trying to take over school boards. And it was like, we like, these are the places where there's the opportunity, because these elections are very localized, very low turnout.
Yeah.
And, it's from your community. People know you. I mean, they may know that you're an atheist and you're a pretty good person. And they have nothing against you other than you're an atheist. But also, there's a need to build this pipeline. And I don't have money. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I have enough money to feed my family, but I don't have money to dump into political campaigns.
And neither do the humanists or American atheists. But I mean, it's not churches that are pouring money into the Republican coffers, are they? Or maybe they are, I guess.
Well, they're para-church organizations, right? Like, they're organizing churches, but they're like, they're organized. But legally, they're kind of like C4s and
right.
whatever they call it, issue C3s or whatnot. So, they set up these nonprofit and think tanks and PACs that, are funneling the money.
Right. So things like Hobby Lobby guy using dark money to sort of build that network. We don't have anything like that, is what you're saying. There's nothing particularly secular.
I mean, we have one PAC that mostly does endorsements, and like, I don't want to make a dig at this. Like, I think Ron Millar is doing an amazing job with the resources that he has, with the Center for Free Thought Equality, and getting all these people to come to them to ask for their endorsement and, like, to basically out themselves as secular in a very public way, not just to their communities, but we're getting an endorsement from these organizations that is like the political arm of the American Humanist Association. Like, like 15 years ago, like, that wouldn't be a thing. I mean, it could have been a thing, but I think we have good building blocks in there, but, like, we're 60 years behind in the race.
Right. Definitely. Related to that, though, Juhem, I don't know, and this is something I have difficulty articulating, is that certainly with atheists, probably with nuns as well, like, it's difficult to articulate a positive philosophy, right? Like, we don't have things that are necessarily, well, nuns don't have this. Not many atheists are able to do it. Say, like, what are the things that we want, right? Whereas we've seen the right with Christian nationalism or just churches in general, they're able to do this very, very well. They're able to establish political platforms, specific goals, what they want in a Supreme Court justice, how they feel about Roe v. Wade. The flip side of that, though, is that most of what we think about day-to-day stuff is largely secular, right? Most of what government does. If we're talking about regulations, where you put a stop sign, whether it's business interests or environmental concerns, these are all things that are secular. So, and then this is where I start to stumble, is that like, this is secularism, right? Like, how is this? Can't we say people who are interested in this sort of stuff are themselves secular? If you have people who are like, yeah, I like science in a education curriculum, that's great. I want more money for the military, or I want less money for the military. That's a secular interest, isn't it?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that, yeah, like retail politics, and yeah, it's fairly secular. I mean, but what we're meaning in the sense of like getting more people who are openly non-theistic and or non-religious in office, it's a few things. Like, like I am an atheist, I'm a humanist, and I'm affected by the school policies, like, there's an interest in me in being involved in that kind of thing. But also, even more so, I mean, I'm glad that I'm not in the other side of the of the river in Virginia, where like things are getting really hairy there. But yeah, like, even the presence, even voicing these things, because Christians are very good at framing everything as a Christian issue. And essentially what has happened what happens in American politics is that politics is a theological debate here. Like, it's like liberal Christians versus conservative Christians. But the voices of people who, we don't care about your pet internal wars. Where do we stand on these issues, and what do we want? And maybe we want the same things as liberal Christians want, as polls will show. But we don't want to make this about religion. We want to make this about, what's the best policy. Like, if you want to be religious and you want to do your prayers and you want to do your Sunday school, sure, you can do it. Not in my public school. And this is like at the this is like very simple politics. But when you start adding the layers of, like, who wants to have like these Christian nationalist policies that are not just about converting everybody to a particular brand of Christianity, but also what do we gonna do with people of color in this country? What are we gonna do with people who identify as there are different layers. And so at that point, yeah, our politics is, or at least the politics of most knowns and secular people, is like, it's usually to the left of that.
Yes.
Of course, being to the left of that is not very hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But essentially, but the way we have framed our politics generally has been as, or have we done, is essentially, I don't want to say reactionary, but reactive. So we are reacting to what the religious are doing, and not necessarily putting forth, okay, we want to do this because this is a good policy, not because religious people are doing some crappy thing. And I think we need more of that. Like, people running affirmatively, okay, I'm secular, and maybe not want to be the secular candidate. I will understand, like, people, I don't want to be a secular candidate, but the same way that people have no qualms of saying that they're Christian or they're Jewish or they're Muslim or they're Buddhist, somebody should be able to run for office on some like inane issue and have no problem saying that they're an atheist.
Yeah. But do you think, I mean, as the number of nuns increases, do you think that the Democrats will begin to realize that this is a potential voting bloc that could be courted?
Um, I'm a registered Democrat, but I feel, as a Democrat, and I live in New England many years, and as a Democrat, I feel as a Red Sox fan before 2004,
Yeah.
meaning that, sure, things may be going well, but at some point they're gonna
Yes.
collapse.
I know that very well
And
myself. Yeah.
where are you from? New England?
Yes. Yeah. I grew up in Massachusetts.
Yeah. Okay.
And I
Yeah.
spent every fall or every October of my life in Massachusetts until 2004 when they won. I moved to Seattle like 2 weeks before. It was ridiculous. No. Yeah. But I know that
Like in
sense of
2017, 2007, or
yeah.
2013.
Well, yeah, I've been away since then. But I know that
Okay.
sense. I like everything looks good now. It's all going to fall apart. There's no way they're
Yeah.
going to pull it off.
And yeah, so I generally have that same feeling. I got over it with Red Sox, but yeah, somehow it's not. I haven't gotten over it with the Democrats, and I think part of it has to do with and I think this is one of the reasons I want to I want to write about these topics, because people know me for all the stuff that I've done on knowns demographics, and I get mislabeled as a demographer or as a sociologist, which I'm neither.
Okay.
Some of my best friends are.
Right.
I
Yes.
like these are the labels that you're
Right.
afraid of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Some of my best friends are sociologists, and they're but I mean, I spent a lot of time trying to get a PhD in political science, and I want to be called one. And so sometimes we think that party politics means that parties are gonna try to attract people, but for the most part, parties are very conservative in how they play their and so why do you want to expand the base of the party and bring a new group that may have other demands, considering that you have already all these interest groups, especially in the Democratic Party, where we can't satisfy them well. um and so there's that. The other aspect is that national political parties are not really a thing in the United States, right? Like they control now a little bit more in terms of money and like how they flow, but there's nothing to say that a humanist from California can't win office, which is it's actually just happened, or it's been happening for the last 10 years. And also, like these groups demand things from the Democratic Party, so it's not like the where is like the I'm thinking about not Naleo, Amigos, I mean, no, Unidos, which was formerly the National Council of La Raza. They're kind of like a constituency within the Democratic Party, like the NAACP. So you have all these groups who have particular interests, who have made, like, have played their way into Democratic politics. And I think that the way we need to do is not wait for the Democrats to come to us, but we need to force the Democrats to come to realize that there's a constituency in there, and these things are happening. Like Sarah Levin is doing a great work in that regard. So these things all are happening at a micro level. What I'm just thinking is like we need to put them, some of them, not, I mean, we don't have resources to put them all of them in hyperdrive, but some of them need to take need to take priority. Like, so what do we want? Do we want politicians? Do we want like be taken serious as a voting bloc? Because I mean they are a voting bloc. Like the knowns are kind of like the the anti white evangelicals.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
In terms of like their voting patterns and their size. I mean, there's questions about the turnout of the knowns, which I think has to do with two things. You shouldn't like use exit polls to calculate turnout because they're done for very different things. But even if we take at face value that the knowns are less likely to vote, there are several reasons. One, they're younger, and young people tend to have lower levels of turnout, and also a lot of the knowns, especially like your non-religious, which are kind of like the vast group, are also not plugged into religion. They're just not plugged into institutions. So to what extent like we want to reach them, to what extent like our organizations want to to what it's what are the boundaries of the organizations that we belong to, like that we consider, or even if we need a new organization, like new ways to organize the knowns, that is not, because right now the big four are basically atheist organizations one way or another. Like like American Atheist is literally American Atheist, but CFI, which are kind of like more skeptics, but also started with like Paul Kurtz, and it's kind of like technically a humanist organization. AHA is obviously a humanist organization, so they're non-theistic. And then FFRF is also a non-theistic organization. So there's not really I don't care about the God question, but I want religion outside of my life. And I don't know if I believe or not, but because most of these knowns are technically functional atheists. Like it's not that they don't care about religion; they also live like God isn't there anyway. But they don't care enough to like
Yeah.
like being an American Atheist member.
Well, yeah. We think of them as small A atheists. They're basically they're atheists. They don't They live as if there's no God.
But I
They don't
wouldn't
worry
say
about it.
that
Yeah,
because they don't say that. I don't want
exactly.
to ascribe things to the knowns, but they're functional atheists. Like they don't really care about religion, and they don't really care about heaven or hell. And
Well, what demand, if there were to make, if the nuns were either to make a demand, what demand should it be? What's the biggest thing they ought to be pushing for now, either in the Democratic Party, in politics generally, or what should parties be doing to get them engaged? What would be a great policy prescription or just a great goal?
I think just in terms of getting something from the party, will be getting money, like to essentially do GOTB for, like, I mean, GOTB. I don't want to. I
A
sound like I sound
GODB?
like
What is
sorry.
that?
I sound like my wife who works in the government and just drops
Yeah,
these acronyms at me.
right.
Uh, it's get out the vote, kind of like campaigns and registration drives and stuff like that. That a lot of these other organizations do very well, trying to get people organized. I think that, I mean, if the Democratic Party really wants to, or people in the Democratic Party want to get support from these groups who, on paper, should support them, and the ones who get out and vote actually do for the most part. I think that that will be, to me, the first thing is like getting resources to get these people activated. And I think if we're able to do that, then a lot of other things may start falling into place, because the more engaged they are, they may they get into plug into campaigns. They may become staffers. They may become, like, when people get elected, they when people retire, they have the experience to, like, try to go for office, or go back to their hometowns and, like, run for office in there at the local level,
Right.
or something like so. So I think,
Which is part of the pipeline again.
yes, it is part of the pipeline. So I think parties have money for that.
Mm.
Something that we can do at small level, but I mean, that will be something.
Why should nuns be interested in the Democratic Party? Just because they're not Republicans, or what would the connection be between being a nun and voting Democrat? Yes, and I know the trick is, other than they're not Republicans.
Yes, I know. Like, you put it hard.
That's the catch.
that other than they're not Republicans, but to a large extent, even if policy wise, the Democrats are quite conservative in their prescriptions, right? Like they don't really challenge capitalism. They don't, and they're still quite neoliberal in their policy prescriptions. Usually, you don't have Democrats proposing policies that directly harm people. They're not in the culture war to mess up with people. Usually, even if policies don't go far enough, or they put these silly rules to, like, means test them and stuff like that, usually the idea is not to make life more miserable for particular sets of groups.
Right.
And
Yes.
and for the largest part, that's what a lot, what surveys show that a lot of non-religious folk want. Like, they want, like, universal health insurance. They want, like, like, decent social safety net. They want not to, like, they want to live lives with dignity and not be, like, at the mercy of a corporation. um and so I mean, on paper, like, yeah. And I think if we were getting more involved in that sense, and we could push politics in a different direction, because of course, like, the Democratic Party policies, and also the Republican Party policies as well, are determined by the people who are in office. And to the extent that you're able to elect people with those ideas, and you can see the generational differences now, especially in the Democratic Party, like, looking at the old guard of, like, Pelosi and Clyburn, and how Representative Maxwell, for example, is now the first Gen Z person in Congress, or, like, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talk about politics. This is very different. because they're shaped by very different experience. Like these people are like post-war
Yeah, yeah, right,
politicians
yeah.
who
Right.
like still think that like the Republican Party that betrayed Nixon and like made him resign somehow is still around.
Right.
Like the
Yes.
ghost of, yeah, and so and I just heard an interview with Representative Maxwell where he says, like, we don't have, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly his words, but essentially, like, my experience with the Republican Party is very different from the experience that these people had. Like,
Hmm.
I'm not here to negotiate because there's nothing to negotiate.
Yeah, yeah. They're not. It's not a buddy buddy click anymore. Where they?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, like this.
I see. But
Because I mean,
now,
these are children who grew up in the in the midst of the 2008 crisis, and
yeah,
that and so it's not like, and things have gotten worse since
yeah,
then. So it's not like,
yeah. That's a good point. But now, so this leads to something I I kind of sense in the background. Like, do you think it's going to take then secular people to craft secular laws in a secular country, right? Because you've mentioned it, right? Like the policy is driven by the people in office. To get the people in office, you need to start mobilizing this bloc, which represents, but it's as big as the white evangelical bloc in the US, but totally underrepresented, virtually unrepresented. Do you think that nuns have to be the ones in power to get a more secular country, or can other politicians from a religious background with religious beliefs deliver on secular needs?
I don't think we have to be. I'm not talking about dominion. That's an evangelical thing.
I'm not.
But
I didn't mean to slip
I
into that, but
yeah,
yeah.
but I think it's, I think you need to have our voice prominently out there. There's only one president, like, at a time. Unless we get into like Pope and anti-Pope thing
Yeah.
eventually, but in the meantime, there's only one president at a
Yes.
time. We haven't even been able to get a woman in there, and so I'm not. I mean, I may be surprised, and like in 8 years, there's going to be an atheist president somehow, but I'm not holding my breath. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but at the same time, I don't think it's very likely. In the same way that when I was in 2004 watching the elections result, I wasn't expecting in 2008 a black person was going to win. So I could be surprised. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. But people in leadership and in the party, like, prominent voices, like, having maybe like Representative Hoffman running the SCC. No, that's the Senatorial Campaign Committee. The NCC,
Oh,
like,
God.
the Congressional Campaign Committee.
There's those
Uh,
three-letter acronyms again. The
I know.
TLA.
These are four, actually. The
Four.
triple C.
Oh, I,
The
so many
Democratic
C's.
Congressional Campaign. So
Yeah.
those are partially symbolic positions, but also they're positions of some sort of power. And I want to say something that there's this assumption, the secular vote, counting atheists, agnostics, and then like all the knowns and whatnot. It depends on how you count. Could be, it ranges from 67 to 75% pro Democrat, but that still means there's a big Republican contingent in there, and I think Democrats shouldn't sleep on that. That shouldn't count on that forever. That that those numbers are gonna hold steady forever and ever. Because I mean, there's an element of secularism, and these tend to be dudes and tend to be white and tend to be like, but they're very anti woke, and there's a large element of the movement. I don't have numbers for it, but I certainly have met many in which they're very good at questioning the centrality of religion. Like, there are skeptics about the centrality of religion in American society, but they don't really question other structures of power in our society. So they question religion, but they don't question whiteness, and they don't question male privilege, and they don't question capitalism, or like the lack of a social welfare state, or so. So there is a potential GOP base in there, and there is that's essentially the GOP base. Like there's all that. It's interesting because one of the things that I've seen, and I have to crunch numbers because I think a lot of this is more anecdotal, but like and because it's very hard to get numbers for these. But one of the things is that the knowns tend to, at least one of the last surveys that I had that was large enough to count this, libertarians tend to be like more likely than not be knowns than other Republicans. But what we have seen since 2015, 2016 is that libertarians like threw liberty out of the window, and they're like, we're gonna go full on racist. So liberty is not about taxes now. It's more about like, I want to say the N word in public.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right. On many cases, these particular atheists, their views don't actually differ from sort of a regular conservative. The only difference is the God question. On that note, maybe we can, I don't know, Todd, what you think about moving on to the kind of true atheist round.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm worried we already did too much of it, though. Because, Juhem, you've touched on so much today. Well, we can start with a classic. I don't know. We may have asked you this one before. Let's see if your answers changed.
I don't think you have.
No,
you
well, we
did
didn't
the
do
true
it the
atheist.
first
Oh,
time.
really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a simple yes or no questions about what a true atheist
You're
can
asking
do.
me to give you a simple question.
Yeah, but you
I mean,
can add
simple
an
answer.
explanation. It's not a
Okay.
gotcha test. There's no trick questions.
Okay.
There's an infinite number of right answers and an infinite number of wrong answers, but the infinite number of wrong answers is greater than the other. So, yes or no, can a true atheist believe in God?
Well, a survey says yes.
Really?
You usually get one or two that
Yeah,
will
right.
say that they identify as atheists, and then they would say, "How do you believe in? Do you believe in what are your beliefs about God?" And there's no such thing. And then you get a few that would say, like, "I believe in a personal God," and I was maybe they are their own personal God, and it's a matter of interpretation. But
Right?
statistically, it's possible.
But when you're compiling that, what do you do with it? Do you scrub it? Is it like an error?
I mean, it depends. I mean, it's in an error. I mean, I think it depends. I mean, it's usually if the whole, like, let's say we do an analysis, like we try to find all these questions that are incongruous, and we try to see if there's a pattern, like it's somebody punking this survey,
Right, yeah.
or but if most of the responses do make sense, maybe either it's a interviewee error. Maybe they meant to click something different and they just click that. So we don't know. Or maybe maybe they literally mean that. Or maybe, we're measuring something different. Maybe they say, like, they believe in God and God is themselves.
Yeah. Wow. That was a great explanation.
Can a true atheist believe the universe was created by someone or something?
Well, certainly by something, if that's an explosion.
Okay. Yeah, it depends how you define something. Yes.
Okay. Can a true atheist think Jesus was a great teacher?
I think so. I mean, I personally don't think Jesus would have, like, passed gotten a teaching license
Yeah.
in most counties, but I think there's people who have gotten, like, things from, and it depends of which one of the gospels you read and you want to highlight. I think it's
Yeah.
possible.
It does. A lot depends on which gospel you read.
Exactly.
Mhm. All right. Can a true atheist be a social conservative?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think we saw that with the libertarian thing. That's
Yeah,
Well,
that's
and
true.
also, I remember in the height of the same-sex marriage debate in the early 2010s, I was giving a talk, and somebody straight up came to me and said, like, like I cannot, go with this same-sex marriage thing because I'm, biology. It's like dudes and ladies. Uh,
Mm.
so yeah.
It's a very materialist explanation. That's all right. Can a true atheist be close friends with a religious fundamentalist?
I think so. Yes. Yes.
Are you friends with any religious fundamentalists?
I was.
Really?
He's not a fundamentalist anymore, but
Oh,
he was.
okay.
Okay, but
And we
Okay.
were friends.
but you were friends when he was a religious fundamentalist.
And yes, we were
Okay.
friends in the midst of his conversion.
Okay. All right.
And no, it's a story for another day, but it's an interesting story. And also, I still have friends who have gone the rabbit hole, and I still try to remember how they were.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right.
Similar to that, can a true atheist vote for a religious fundamentalist?
Yes, happens all the time.
Okay.
Really? What would
Yeah.
I mean? Like, is there a time you could justify that? Because I mean, we're thinking about if I can kind of get a sense of where this newsletter is going, and haven't looked at some of it about like where there are the nuns, what they're up to, how they're connected to larger networks, or what they're not connected to. Like, if you're gonna, as an atheist, would there ever be a time where you can imagine yourself not voting for an atheist who has terrible ideas and voting for a fundamentalist who does things that you support?
I mean, is that possible? I think.
Or just imagine it. Is there a
I mean,
situation
I
that
mean, it
you can
depends on
do
how
that?
we're defining fundamentalist. Because I think there's an interesting aspect, and this is something I've written more in Interfaith America, and I'm actually writing right now a piece based on the PRI data that came out a couple of weeks ago on like Christian nationalism. But one of the things that I have noticed, and this is like my Latinx politics expertise kicking in, I'm thinking of my days growing up in Puerto Rico. A lot of these people who like became fundamentalists, Pentecostals, like they did have many of them. Like in many places in Latin America, this was a religion of the dispossessed, and so they would have like often very socially conservative positions in terms of like family and patriarchy and issues like that. But many of them were also very progressive on social issues and they were challenging, the status quo in terms of like combating poverty. A lot of them had and still have missions, helping people with addiction. And so you have that duality. I think the problem is like in these American context, of the Christian right and the right wing, as we know it right now. It's a marriage of capitalism, and greed, and essentially like it's not just about conversion of souls or anything. It's about dominance, and it also means respecting the status quo. Like there's no there was an element of liberation theology uh, that many fundamentalists had that you don't see in the discourse that we're having right now.
Yeah, I can see that. So, yeah, if we go back to the days of liberation theology, or if it comes up, if it happens to develop, that's something where it makes sense, whereas not in the current climate. I can see that. I can see that. Juhem, can a true atheist believe that a person is evil?
Why not?
Do you use that terminology, like good and evil?
Not really, but I'm not the atheist policing here.
Well, no, but this is like you're supposed to in this game.
Yeah, this is.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a,
Yeah, but I think somebody can think that people can be evil.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and I've heard atheists talk about that about communism, also like those libertarian kind of kinds. So
Mm,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's a type.
yeah. Okay, and last but not least, and perhaps maybe this is the most difficult one, can a true atheist lie about being religious to please a family member?
Yes.
Okay.
All right,
And
that sounds good. Have you
yeah.
ever done that?
I
That's
haven't
interesting.
actually, but I mean, I never hid that I was an atheist once I realized I was an atheist.
And then it wasn't
Uh,
a problem?
but well, my family wasn't churchy types, so I think that's one of the interesting aspects is that like the experiences of that that's especially this assumption that Latinos are either Catholic or like Pentecostals, and that it's such for me it's not a hard thing. Like there's that, and I think that the last episode that you had Emil Clark when she's talking about Colombia, that Catholicism is like all encompassing, that some things are easier to do, like when you have a culture that is that dominant, like you're not antithetical to it. And if you see, actually it's interesting because the politics of the Latino knowns and the Catholics are more similar than the Catholics and the evangelical, and the knowns tend to be the most liberal Latinxes, and the Catholics tend to be liberal but not as left-wingy, and then the evangelicals have become really, they were more conservative and now have moved to the like really to the right wing. And but yeah, especially if you come from that conservative evangelical world where the churches tend to be your close relatives, families, neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to play your cards really
Mm.
close to your vest.
Hmm. Yeah, and you know what? That all makes such sense, Juhem. That's a fantastic round. Let's wrap it up. Juhem, let's see. We got. Can you plug your I don't know. What do you have any plugs you need to make?
Well, I mean, the newsletter, certainly.
Fantastic.
So
Yeah.
it's secularpolitics.substack.com. I try to be as less as uh, as the least possible in what you call it, musky world. So I'm not using my Twitter that much
Oh yeah,
anymore,
yeah,
but in
yeah.
Hmm.
That makes sense.
Juhemnr,
Uh-huh.
JUHEMNR, or you can follow Socioanalítica at SOCIANALITICA. Yes, I did it.
Nailed it.
Nice.
Um,
Also, we'll link it below, Juhem.
Yeah,
There'll
yeah.
be
Thank
links
you.
below.
We won't make people
I
listen
Uh,
back to that
I
and
just
try and
wanted
type
yeah,
to
it
see
in.
if you could do it. To be honest.
yeah. I was a spelling bee champion in my school. So.
Okay.
Nice. That's
Yes.
awesome.
Uh,
Right.
So yeah, I think, and then also I'm doing writing for Interfaith America at least until the summer. So I've been doing some writing in terms of this Latinx culture war, as I like to call it, in terms of like the increasing number of knowns, while the right wification of the Latinx evangelical cohort. And just this past week, I got one about being an atheist, where human is celebrating Christmas for the first time in 2 decades.
Fantastic. Everybody should check that out. And thanks again for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, that was Juhem Navarro-Rivera. Really interesting talking with him.
Super interesting guy. Returning guest.
Yes,
Back
yes.
again. Good to catch
So,
up with him.
yeah, definitely. What were some of your takeaways from this conversation?
I think the big one is that he focused on power, right? That's such a helpful tool for analysis and explaining why, like, hey, look, if there are just as many white evangelicals as there are nuns, atheists, agnostics, non-believers, people who don't affiliate with any church, why does government seem to prefer, or why does government actually, pass policies that support evangelicals and either disregard, ignore, or harm the non-religious? And the answer is power, right? Like okay, that's key. It's not demographics. And he mentions it, like he's not a demographer, he's not a statistician. He's a political scientist, and that's what he's looking at. So I think that's a super helpful tool. It's something that we need to keep in mind. The challenge then becomes, it kind of becomes a tautology, right? Like it doesn't answer anything because
Right. Yes.
well, why don't they have any
Yeah.
power?
Yeah.
Well, because they're powerless. That's why.
Right.
But he
Yeah.
mentions, he talks about how do secularists build what evangelicals kind of have without a church? And he mentions some of it. And I think he said that, there's a skeleton in place. There is that pipeline. And we've talked about like all of those. I think we've talked about some of the pieces separately, whether it's American Atheists, or what atheist groups are now doing to vet politicians. We know that there's definitely there's an intellectual group. I mean, there's a tremendous intellectual group when it comes to atheism. And we know that like those social groups that are growing and become community activists, like Atheists United, they're part of that. How they become united and glued together and strengthened, I think that's the big question. And it seems like that's a lot of what he's taking on. It's pretty fascinating. I think you can tell it's a work in progress, and he doesn't know where it's going to end. But that's what makes it interesting. So yeah, follow his Substack. It's going to be really interesting to see where this goes. What about you, Nathan? Was there anything in particular that jumped out? You thought, yeah, that's my jam.
We touched on it a little bit, like this issue of like money in politics. I mean, like, I think it's the case in general that, pretty much all atheist and humanist organizations are like, they would do with a lot more money. And they
Yeah,
would,
totally.
like they're all kind of like struggling. There's probably a lot of like, few full-time staff members, like a lot of it is volunteers and so on. And obviously when there's like not a lot of money to be thrown around like politically, that's an important thing as well. And perhaps there's more in Christian communities, there's a greater acceptance that people should be donating their money to these causes. Like, I don't know if I'm sure there's Christian churches who are struggling, but I'm sure there's many who are like, just, flush with money, So I think that's a part of it is like the sort of financial resources you need to be a politician. Like, I don't think, you can't just sort of get by just by being a really great politician or something. Like, you need kind of money behind you as
Yeah,
well in the
right.
US. So that's
Yeah,
the thing.
I
Yeah.
know. And it also seems like that sort of religious motivation to spend money in particular ways, right? Like the he gets us thing, like Hobby Lobby guy, motivated Christian billionaires seem to love spending money on Jesus-y stuff, religious stuff, court cases, Project Blitz. Motivated billionaires don't seem interested in spending money on secular causes. Which, I mean, to say like we got to kind of divide what the two mean here, because like deregulating deregulating train lines so that trains don't need brakes. You don't need to pay for the brakes. That's secular in the sense that it's not religious. It's dealing with the material world, but that's not what we mean. Sure, we've got wealthy elites who are interested in spending money on that, but not necessarily finding ways to block religion from dominating other people, right? Like why aren't there more billionaires involved in, I don't know, donating Plan B in states that have outlawed abortion? We don't see that kind of money stepping up. We don't see, it's not like American Atheist puts out an alert like, "Hey, we've got this lawsuit coming up," and it's not the top 10. It's not Sam. I can't remember his name. SBF.
Oh,
Yikes.
Bankman-Fried. Yeah.
Bankman-Fried. It's not. He's not throwing money at that. His philanthropy
Right.
doesn't go that way.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that's another thing is that like billionaires like that, which I think he is secular, but it's also focused on like, how can we colonize Mars and
Yeah, right. Yeah,
in 200 years and like
right.
make that really great.
Yeah,
But
yeah, totally. And I get, like
yeah,
using new computers is to wipe out malaria. Sure, that's great. We need a high tech. Africa needs high tech mobile toilet units to prevent dysentery. Sure, maybe, but also like we need, why aren't we focused on legal forms of liberation here against religion?
yeah,
So
I
yeah,
think,
it's
yeah,
it's I, it's again like the atheism as a negative philosophy doesn't allow for that kind of investment, but secularism does. So we'll see what else is
yeah.
found.
I think it
Yeah.
could also be like a question of strategy, whether you want to attack sort of Christian nationalism, which way you want to attack it, I guess. Like, do you want to attack it as a religion, or do you want to kind of fight various smaller fights? Well, not small, but I mean like abortion or something like, or like transgender rights, something like that. Do you want to fight those, or do you want to kind of tackle like the overarching ideology? And I think there's probably different ways, different approaches you could take. But I think it's true that often like abortion and so on, like it's all kind of connected through this thread of Christian nationalism. And so I think that may be a place to fight it from a secular angle, or from like a non-religious angle, could be one
Yeah,
way to do it. Yeah.
right. Looking at it as fighting Christian nationalism, and yeah, and like was just like Juhem said, like there's the pipeline is kind of already built in there. There are ways that non-religious people can work their way in, but it needs to be built up. And if that like and it to your point, it might not even be it wouldn't be about winning those battles even. It might be about how you fight those battles. Do you build lasting institutions that are self-sustaining, or are you just, trying to put out brush fires everywhere?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like, not to go too much further on this, but like maybe, like 15 years ago or something, it seemed like maybe the tide was turning more to like our direction of, when Obama gets elected, and like, there's court decisions about same-sex marriage and so on. Like it seemed like the other side is kind of on the back foot, but now it seems that we are. I don't know if you have the same impression. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
like
there's definitely,
their
yeah,
side has the momentum, kind of.
yeah.
Yeah.
And but part of what Jum looked at is like they've always had representation, right? They've always had a presence politically, both in terms of lobbying, right? There's always been that lobby. They've always been um, sort of politically active, more kind of like grassroots. And also, they've been in government. In the past 10 years, I think before that, everybody was closeted. They're atheists in Congress. They're just closeted, right? That's not the reason. That's not the explanation, but it is like a symptom of the greater issue, right? Where where the power actually lies. So even when they were like, they're losing, it's just because their team suffered a setback, whereas
Hmm.
our team's not even on the field.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah,
what's
that's right.
happening. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a complex, multifaceted arrangement. But
Hmm.
like the thing is that for secularists, people who are non-religious, not really. There's a level of engagement that's just not there yet.
Hmm.
So
So people should definitely check out Juham's Substack. I
please
think
do.
he puts out an article each week,
Yeah, he said he was
maybe
targeting for
sometimes
Friday.
more.
Yeah. So
So I mean, definitely check that out and see how it develops. I mean, I'm interested. He just started it, I think in December or January, so it's
mm,
still relatively new. So there's still a lot of ground to explore. I think it should be interesting.
yeah,
And so
definitely.
we'll include the link below to that.
Yep. And if before you do that, before you leave here, be sure to like and subscribe. That always helps. That's free. So smash those buttons. If you got a few ducats lying around, be sure to visit our Patreon. We always appreciate that, and we send out much love to our patrons. Also, Red Japan, thanks for the theme. All right, that was fantastic. It's a lot to think about, and if you want to contribute, if you want to join in, there's a framework there. It's being built. Now's the chance to leave your mark. All right, everybody. Till next time. Bye-bye.